I like it.
All right, let's hope that doesn't fall. Hello, everyone. This is an amazing event. I was not sure what to expect when I got here this morning, but it has like tripled in size, so I'm really excited to be here. And it's not that often that San Francisco has an event that has so much amazing technology where you can actually test out everything. So for that reason, I've been incredibly happy to be here. As you've been told, I'm a libertarian candidate for governor in California. We have a lot of different kinds of unique policies, but for those of you who don't know, generally we are socially liberal and a little bit fiscally conservative. I'm actually a left-leaning libertarian, so that doesn't sit that well with a lot of libertarians, but that said, I do lean a little bit left. But today, I'm going to be talking about a very important topic, basic income. The idea that we can give out essentially free money, which sounds very strange from a libertarian, but we can give out free money to every single person in America, or at least in California, which is what I'm proposing, based on the fact that widespread automation robots are starting to take jobs. If you haven't been reading the news or haven't even seen some of the stuff out here on the floor, technology is dramatically increasing. Driverless cars will be plentiful over the next 3 or 4 years. We have robots that are flipping hamburgers. We have companies that are completely getting rid of human employees and essentially replacing them with AI, algorithm, things of that nature. Every single person's job is literally threatened at some point. It's not sure exactly when all these jobs will be taken, but certainly in the case of driverless cars and taxis, those could be gone in 18 to 24 months. There are 4 million truck drivers. But the future of basic income is essentially understanding that capitalism may not survive. And so we need new ways of looking at ourselves, new ways of understanding how an economic society might operate in a future that involves transhumanism. Now, earlier you saw the word transhumanism. Transhumanism is the field of merging human beings with machines. Or it's also the idea of applying radical science and technology to our lives. It can be anything from virtual reality, exoskeleton suits, driverless cars, chip implants. I have a chip implant in my hand that can open my front door. It can start a car. It can even send you a text message. If you get close enough to me and you have the right software, you will get a text message. But the point is that transhumanism is this field that is slowly, well, actually quite quickly at this point, taking a lot of technology and merging it with people to such an extent that we're seeing it all over the world in our lives. And especially when you talk about technology such as robots and automation, which challenges how we're going to be able to work in the future. Now, I think it's really important to understand, as dramatic as this may sound, especially from a gubernatorial candidate, the idea is if in 20 years, let's say 50% of the jobs are taken because of automation, where does that leave capitalism? Where does that leave people that want to have money? There are 4 million truck drivers out there with driverless trucks, and we're seeing them now from Tesla, driverless trucks that can actually deliver goods without people. What happens to 4 million jobs? Well, that amount of jobs is almost half the amount that was lost during the Great Recession 10 years ago. It's quite challenging. But in addition to the idea of automation taking jobs, we have this idea that everybody in this room is already starting to live longer. Life extension technology, transhumanist technology, all different types of ideas are essentially making it so that people will live dramatically longer. And if they live much longer, that means things like Social Security won't be able to pay out. And for example, a lot of experts, and you're hearing some of them today and tomorrow, will tell you that there's a very good shot that anyone under age 50 will be able to live to about 150 years in the future, coming now. So anyone, basically, if you have been born in the last 20 years, you have a very good chance of actually probably not even dying and having aging stopped at some point based on a lot of the scientific technology. But for my talk today, what this really means is we have a situation between automation taking jobs and people living dramatically longer for how the workforce is going to be affected. But I think the most important thing to understand is that the evolution of the microprocessor is literally doubling every 18 months, according to Moore's law. And even if it's not doubling or something like that, it's growing tremendously. our brains in the last 200 to 800,000 years have only doubled in size, essentially, or doubled in capacity based on evolution. But the microprocessor is doubling every 18 months. And if you take the 50-year lifespan of the microprocessor and you essentially take it up a scale, you can see that it keeps getting incredibly, until we get to a point when your smartphone probably 10 years will be smarter than you. And most experts won't say it'll be smarter than you. Most experts will probably say within 15 to 20 years, your smartphone will be smarter than you. That's very crazy in a way. I mean, will it do all our jobs? Will it vote? Will it have teach our children things? Will it be better at science and all these other things? Well, the answer is probably yes. So with all this amazing technology coming because of the microprocessor, we have to find an economic system that can actually provide for people so that they don't riot and revolt and essentially kind of freak out and lose their jobs. And this is why I have, as part of my libertarian gubernatorial campaign, proposed a basic income. In fact, even the Democratic Party in California has now recently said they're putting it on their platform as a way to consider how to deal with poverty. The most important thing, though, when you're talking about these basic income things is that in 10, 15 years, robots will be able to do everything that we can do, perhaps better in many cases. Certainly run faster, certainly wash dishes, certainly clean clothes, certainly open the front door and be security systems. So with all these things, everyone's single job is threatened. Now, I know you'll read that they'll say, oh, because of innovation or the human brain is so smart, robots won't replace us. Robots won't be better at jobs than us. This is hype. If you, like I said, if you look at the trajectory of the microprocessor, at some point that microprocessor becomes so incredibly intelligent, it just simply makes the 3 pounds of meat that we carry on our head just not very competitive against something that has unlimited data, can literally tap into the net, into the internet all over the world, and to the cloud, and have information in real time. There's a reason in Wall Street that traders are starting to lose their jobs. It's because algorithms are doing a better job at trading. Now, if people in Wall Street, people who have master's degrees and some of the smartest in the country can lose their jobs due to automation, everybody can. We have to be aware of this fact, and as difficult as it sounds, that an enormous amount of the population, approximately 85%, could lose their jobs within a 30-year window. And it doesn't mean that there's going to be a bunch of new jobs just because technology comes. As the time it takes to train a human being to essentially do the new job, we'll have created computers that can already do that new job better. So you run into this program where even retraining people isn't something that's actually going to work. There's really no way to solve this situation except to pay people money. And that's really the only way we come up. I mean, when you think about it, with robots essentially doing all sorts of things, in order for humans to survive, we're going to have some type of system that creates it. Now, everyone's going to say the very first question, which is, where does that money come from? And we'll talk about that in a sec. But you have to understand that basic income is not a new idea. Richard Nixon tried to pass a basic income back in the 70s. Basic income has, even though it has sort of communist overtones, it's actually not. There's a reason that you give people money, and the reason is because money often makes people more motivated to work, makes people more motivated to kind of essentially become even wealthier than they are. The studies that have come out on basic income so far have shown that most people who actually get a basic income, there's one in Oakland happening, there's one in Finland, these are some kind of test studies, have actually improved people's lives, not just because they get money, but it's improved their incentive because people have a chance to jump classes. But throughout history, there's been various forms of the basic income. But the one that I'm advocating for is quite different. It's called the federal land dividend. And this is where it gets kind of controversial, and this is where my plan is a libertarian plan. Most basic incomes want to raise taxes in order to pay for the widespread automation that's coming, and to pay for Social Security because people are now living, literally 30, 40% longer than they did when Social Security was started. In the 60s, the average lifespan was around 63. Now the average lifespan is around 83, 84, and it's probably going to jump to 100 here in the next 10 or 15 years, especially because of genetic editing, which may revolutionize medicine and revolutionize the way we treat aging in the first place. But the federal land dividend is something quite different. You have to understand that California is 50% essentially empty and comprised of about 40 million unused federal acres, meaning that that's beautiful forest and national parks, and it's different type of empty desert land, different places of California. But in the United States, 50% of the Western United States is also empty. Estimates vary. They can go from anywhere from $120, $130 trillion to 180, some say 220 trillion now, given the stock market. But the point of the story is there's approximately $150 trillion of natural resources that the American government is holding on to for future generations in a trust. And that money can be used to offset poverty, to pay basic income, to pay down the national debt, to do whatever it is that we want to do. Now, in California, we have a burgeoning issue. Approximately 19 million Californians are living in poverty. There are about 40 million Californians, so that's about 40% of Californians live in poverty. Poverty is around $25,000 per household. That's an enormous amount. We have the biggest homeless population of any state. We have the biggest population of any state that lives in poverty. So something must be done in order to make the system better. Well, I have suggested that we lease out parts of our federal land to businesses that want to buy it, and the leasing money would then go directly to a basic income, which would pay every single one of you in this room something. Now, let's just look at a little bit of the math with the amount of federal land that the United States government is holding. There is essentially 325 million Americans, and if you divide $150 trillion by 325 million Americans, you get $500,000. It means every single person in this room is entitled or has a birthright, if you're an American citizen, of $500,000. That's what the value is attributed to that land. That's an enormous amount of money. I can assure you that would solve all the poverty problems we have in California if there was a way to monetize the federal land and get the money to the people that want to pay for education, people that have college debt, people that are hungry, people that have disease. There's a number of ways to do it, but the bottom line is if we have $150 trillion, and just so you know, the national debt is only $20 million, we could pay off the national debt with this kind of, by monetizing this federal land. The point of the story, though, is why do we have almost half of California living in poverty when we have such an empty, vast amount of resources that we can be using to help people pay education, healthcare, save their houses, whatever it is that they need. But the point of the story is something should be done because we have too much poverty. And you know, I know the Democrats will tell you that they have all these services that will support you, and of course they do. And I know the Republicans are against all those services, and mostly libertarians aren't for any services at all. But I definitely stand by the idea that we should try to monetize a large amount of the federal land, not all of it. I would never say let's monetize a national park like Yosemite or something like that. But what I do say is there are empty lands that are literally never being used. When you drive on 101 highway and you look at the coast, you notice that most of it is undeveloped. Well, it's because the California Coastal Commission has been holding that land hostage for a long time. Now, if you're an environmentalist, you're happy about that. But if you live like the 19 million people in California, you might never actually have enough money to visit that land and see the beauty of it in the first place because you're worried about food or feeding your children or something like that. My federal land dividend makes it so that we can start developing these areas, we can start building out these areas, and we can take the revenues from these areas and directly put into every single one of your own pockets. The rich, the poor, we can do it, every single person would get this. It's not something that we would essentially only have for a certain segment of the population. This is land that belongs to every single Californian. This is land that belongs to every single American. The idea is, how do we monetize $150 trillion to end poverty all the way throughout America? It's something that can be done, but we have to do these kinds of things, as I guess controversial as this may come. But the most important thing to understand is, while the idea of a federal land dividend and a basic income is something that's useful and something that's wonderful and something that most people like, The idea is because of coming automation, because of coming life extension, that the slide's supposed to say the life extension age, we have this issue with we must essentially try to do something that would, I'm stuck now. We got stuck. There we go. We need to do something in order with all this automation coming, because if we don't, we'll come back to the World Fair Nano in 2038 or even 2028, and half of you will not only not have a job, but you won't be able to ever get a job again. And so something must be done to provide enough resources so people can eat, live, and do the kinds of things that they want. The reason I really like a basic income, the reason I really like a federal land dividend is because Congress can approve it. The Republicans will like it because it actually enables more business to make more money, but the Democrats will like it because it takes care of the poor. It eliminates poverty. And of course, as a gubernatorial candidate, I like it because we get to help out 19 million Californians that can make California stronger, but right now are having a very difficult time just even living with the kind of debt and the kind of problems that they face living in poverty. So I think the last thing I'll leave you with is, I was just in Chile, and I have the luck of kind of traveling around talking a lot about transhumanism. I met the president of Chile, and I recently spoke at the World Economic Forum. In fact, on some of these issues, every single nation has an opportunity to create a basic income based on their empty federal land. There's a huge amount of natural resources out there that can be monetized. Monetized to help poverty, monetized to feed the poor, monetized to provide the kinds of educations that you want, monetized to pay for college, monetized to pay off national debt. I mean, people are all across the board on what they would do if they were given money every month. But the one thing that we can all say is it generally be very helpful. So ultimately, the future, I think, of our planet with coming widespread automation has to rely on ideas of basic income, where we can use these kinds of, plans, these kinds of civil ideas that could transform our society so that literally when you walk outside in San Francisco, you don't see homeless people. The federal land dividend basic income can eliminate homelessness forever. It can eliminate poverty. So these are the reasons that we would kind of push forth and do all these things. Thanks so much, everyone.